Today, we'll be covering a fascinating topic. But before we do that, how would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. Let's get into the video. Larger than Libya and Asia combined, this legendary island has perplexed and fascinated people for a long time. But is it real? That mythology belongs to the past is the greatest misconception of modern times. Myth is always alive, propagating, feeding, and evolving. It speaks the artist's language, rests on the shoulder of imagination, and draws on the insights in its vicinity. If anything, folk tradition is the most alive of all abstractions, for it continually moves and progresses. The perfect example of this living, breathing entity is Atlantis, the island from Plato's writings. Before we discuss whether Atlantis exists, let us look at the origins of this legend. Atlantis appears in Plato's writings in two distinct places. He mentions it in Timaeus and Critias, two of his much revered dialogues, written around 360 BCE. According to Plato, the island of Atlantis existed 9,200 years before his lifetime. This chronology places Atlantis before Homer and even before the pyramids. It is important to note that we are talking about the birth of the Western civilization. If a culture predated it by 92 centuries, imagine how far back into the past we are going. Plato claims that he heard this story from his grandfather, Critias, who in turn heard it from Drapides, his father. The story had reached Drapides from Solon, the famous lawmaker and poet who had heard it in an Egyptian sanctuary. It seems natural that a story that has traveled across continents should not hold up to historical scrutiny, especially after 2 millennia. Still, people insist on taking it at face value. Why? Most of ancient history is shrouded in folklore, but the poetry of the source often clouds the judgment of modern minds. For instance, historians today generally agree that the city of Troy, long believed to be fictional, did exist. The Greeks thought it existed, and Herodotus, the most respected historian of the ancient world, thought it to be real. But most historians disagreed. That is, until the discovery of the Hisarlik in Turkey. After unearthing the site in the 1870s, Heinrich Schliemann claimed the spot to be the burnt city from Homer's epics. This discovery prompted an interest in the sunken island of Atlantis. After all, if the city of Homer's story existed, why not the city from Plato's Ruminations? While it is an exciting thought to entertain, the difference between the timelines of the two fables is far too much to draw a connection. If we are to be strictly rational, the existence of one does not reflect on the validity of the other, at all. For the sake of argument, let us say that Atlantis did exist, despite the discouraging historical signs. Where can we find it? Plato places the island across Gadara, in front of the Pillars of Hercules. The Pillars of Hercules was the flank to the Strait of Gibraltar, and Gadara is often associated with Gibraltar. Gadara might also be a modern-day Spanish port. Some historians dispute the latter association, proposing other locations as alternates. It might make sense to look for Atlantis around Andalusia, as it is also home to another mythical city, Tartessos. The search for Atlantis in Andalusia was at its peak in the 17th century as multiple scholars, archaeologists, and historians proposed it as the possible location of the myth. Since the story came from Egypt and ended up in Greece, many speculations put the island somewhere in the Mediterranean. Others claim that Atlantis was much closer to Greece, like Crete or even mainland Greece. Some believe the story is a cultural hallmark of the Minoan eruption that destroyed Thera. The eruption raised the settlement of Akrotiri and even affected the island of Crete. From Spain to Greece, the interest surrounding these locations seems to stem from the Mediterranean's contact with Egypt. The oral tradition brought the story northwest from Egypt, and as it traveled, it managed to drag the lost realm there. Such is the power of myth. As it crawls across the surface, it blends ambitions and imaginations along the way. If we backtrack from Greece to Egypt, we come across another fascinating speculation. The land of Atlantis lies within the Cyprus Basin. If tales are to be believed, Atlantis lies at the bottom of the ocean. This hypothesis builds on that foundation. Some scholars have made it an intriguing case for some underwater settlements near Cyprus. Here, man-made structures can be found around 1,500 meters below the surface. If we move closer to Egypt, we find some theories concerning Alexandria, especially the island of Pharos. Others have placed Atlantis around northwest Africa, namely Morocco and Mauritania. Other guesses propel the location further westward. Malta has been proposed as a potential location, whereas some historians have even reached as far as Italy. Sardinia, the second largest island in the Mediterranean, gives way to some mysterious ideas. If we refer to the Bronze Age collapse between the 12th and 9th centuries, we arrive at probably the biggest mystery of ancient history, the Sea Peoples. The Sea Peoples is a theory that, along with some ecological disasters, helps understand the collapse of large empires around the Mediterranean region. Sardinia is filled with remnants of the Bronze Age culture and has many similarities with Plato's descriptions of the island. However, the wild imaginations of historians do not stop there. Some have proposed moving further to the west. Some have suggested the Azores Islands, west of the Portuguese coast. But in reaching there, we arrive in the Atlantic Ocean, or the Ocean of Atlas. Atlas seems related to Atlantis, if in nothing else than name. Some people think we will find the underwater Atlantis between the Old and the New World. And why stop there? Why not make the leap to the New World? Unsurprisingly, some have taken that leap to the Bahamas and mainland Americas. You might be thinking, this is a wild goose chase. You're not the only one. These days, most people agree that Atlantis is a lost cause. Upon reading Plato's writings, it becomes clear that he creates a fictional land to make a philosophical point. After all, it is a widespread practice in philosophy. For instance, think about Plato's allegory of the cave. If you are unaware of it, it goes something like this. A bunch of people, having lived their lives chained up in a cave, perceive the shadows projected on a well-lit wall as reality. The whole exercise serves as a treatise on the subjective perception of reality. Philosophers make up similar scenarios all the time to demonstrate complex ideas. Does it make them true? No. In the words of British philosopher A.N. Whitehead, the safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. I do not mean the systematic scheme of thought which scholars have doubtfully extracted from his writings. I allude to the wealth of general ideas scattered through them. Plato's works have served as the bedrock of Western philosophy, so it is understandable why some people hang on to his every word. However, these people might just be missing the forest for the trees when it comes to Atlantis. Plato might have just been presenting an image of aggressive imperialism. Many Renaissance writers were impressed by the allegorical tale. Its ideas extended to Francis Bacon's New Atlantis and Thomas More's Utopia. But it was not the utopia many people will have you believe. Atlantis was a land of rich princes who conquered many lands around the Mediterranean but were finally defeated by the Athenians. Eventually, it became a hub of lust and greed. Before the earthquakes devastated it and brought it to the bottom of the ocean, Atlantis was half dead already. So where did the idea of Atlantis being this utopian civilization come from? Let's move ahead to the 19th century. A U.S. politician, Ignatius Donnelly, published Atlantis, the Antediluvian World in 1882. By laying down arguments for the lost land's existence, the book proposed 13 different scenarios. Once again, the discovery of Hisarlik played a crucial role in his quest for Atlantis. Ignatius's blueprint allowed people to tangent off to pseudoscientific speculation. However, it would be irresponsible to lay all the blame on just Ignatius. While he is to blame for a lot of wasted time and energy, the mysterious nature of the subject has led to controversial readings throughout history. For instance, upon discovering the New World, many people claimed it was Atlantis. Others identified it with Scandinavia, which up until the Middle Ages was a brutal, faraway land to many Europeans. While it is highly likely that Atlantis was a philosophical construct of Plato, the search for this mysterious entry has not ceased. Calling the island fictional will not deter conspiracy theorists. Things do not add up if we look at the timeline and the events. The chronology, especially, seems extremely unlikely. But all fiction is inspired by subjective experiences, and experiences are rooted in some degree of truth. So, like other mythological tales, does it contain some truth? It seems likely. Many scholars believe that Plato freely borrowed from the symbols and metaphors of Greek folklore, like any writer of ancient times. So, what inspired it? Several events could have inspired the story of Atlantis. The most apparent inspiration could be the environmental destruction in the region. Earthquakes around the Aegean Sea and the destruction of Crete and other areas could have given birth to an oral tale or two. The destruction of Helike in the 4th century during Plato's lifetime could have also served as an inspiration. Then there's the Thera eruption, one of the biggest volcanic eruptions in human history. The event was recorded in Egypt, the presumed progenitor of the story. Then there is the mystery of the Sea Peoples. While we may not know much about them, the ancient Greeks probably did. One thread that could tie the Sea Peoples to Plato is their final battle. Ramses III led the Egyptians against the Sea Peoples and defeated them in the Battle of Jahai. Passed down from an Egyptian sanctuary to Plato, it is highly likely that such a tale reached Greece, if not the news of the battle itself. The Italians were probably involved in the Sea Peoples movement, and the island of Sardinia shows signs of the Sea Peoples and the Bronze Age culture. Some people believe that the tales of the Trojan War and the events of the failed Athenian invasion of Sicily could have also served as catalysts. Absolutes are usually not helpful when it comes to stories of ancient times. One should be able to understand them as legends and fables, grounded in subjective experiences and not in historical facts. Atlantis may or may not exist, but by engaging in that discussion, one might lose sight of the more significant objective: to engage with the most extraordinary mind in Western history. After all of Western philosophy is but a footnote to Plato. We hope you found this video on where is the lost city of Atlantis, does it even exist, captivating. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while it's still available. The link is in the description.